seeing them as much as you'd like to. Those of you who are caring for spouses or parents at home, you're still trying to balance your role as a caregiver and trying to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. And so for you home caregivers, if you are binge watching Netflix or you're eating more than usual amount of comfort food, that is okay. Millions are doing it, including me, and I am not a caregiver anymore. Obviously, as you can tell, I am an extrovert. I get energy from people, and I'm really missing seeing people in person these days. In fact, if a door-to-door salesman were to come by my house this afternoon and knock on the door, I would invite him or her in, socially distanced, and we would talk as long as he wanted to. I might end up with $100 of Avon products, but that would be okay with me. Today, I want to start off by talking about caregivers who go above and beyond the call of duty. My folks lived at the Wesleyan Homes in Georgetown, which is a suburb of Austin. They lived there for 14 years, 5 years in independent living and 9 in skilled nursing. So the Wesleyan became like a second home for me. I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours up there. And even after my parents passed away, I've stayed close to the Wesleyan. I've spoken there and I've done writing projects for them. And recently, they had me do some articles about 5 of their employees who've done outstanding things during the pandemic. They called them everyday heroes. I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. First, there's Anthony. Anthony is just 22 years old. He's doing his last year of college online, and he started working at the Wesleyan just in October as a server in the dining hall. And pretty soon, he really fell in love with the residents. He just loved talking to them and hearing their stories and learning about them. And then in March, when the pandemic hit and their family could no longer come see them, Anthony was one of those employees who became like a family to the residents. And when Easter came along, the administrator of the assisted living where he worked said, "We want to do something special for the residents." And Anthony said, "I know what to do. I want to dress up in a bunny costume." Well, now Anthony is 6'4", so that would take a big bunny costume. But he went out and he found one, and he paid for it in his own money, $150 out of his money he spent to have this bunny outfit. And on the Friday before Easter, he put the costume on, and he and the activities director went to every single room in assisted living and gave out candy, and they made those residents laugh and smile. When they saw that bunny, they didn't know what hit them. They just couldn't get over it. One of the residents said, "This is the best Easter present I ever had." Well, that's what I call going above and beyond. And what I'm glad to say is that Anthony is about to graduate next December, and he's now thinking about a career in long-term care. And I'd say he'd be the perfect person for it. Then there's Geraldine. She's the last interview I did just a few weeks ago. In fact, her article came out today. I just saw it a few minutes ago. Geraldine is in her early 60s. She is from the Caribbean island of Santa Lucia, and she has been a certified nursing aide for about 15 years, and she just loves her work. And so when the pandemic hit, they closed down the hair salon in the nursing home, and all of her residents were so disappointed that they could no longer go and get their hair done and look good. And she saw how disappointed these people were. So Geraldine said, "You know, I can do hair. I've done my own hair for years and years. I've done my daughter's hair. I'm going to give it a try." And her first person she tried it on was a man on her wing, and his hair had gotten long and scraggly looking, and she gave him a terrific haircut. And pretty soon, everybody saw that haircut, and they lined up for Geraldine to do their hair. So for the last 5 months, she has been the hair salon. She's worked on 10 to 15 people a week. And that's in addition to her regular duties. She did all the hair work on her own free time. And many of the residents asked if they could pay her And she said, absolutely not. This is my gift to you. If you want to pay me, say a prayer for me. That's better than money. Geraldine is the spirit that we all want to see in caregivers. Now, I don't have the ability to follow you around in your lives and see what you do, but I know that you are going above and beyond as well. I'm sure there are days when you don't feel like being a caregiver, but you put on a good expression and you do it anyway. So I just want you to know that I know I'm talking to about 45 everyday heroes. When I thought about the caregivers I wanted to honor, my parents came to mind. Because you see, they gave me an example of what caregiving should look like. They were great role models. After my senior year in high school in 1962, my father moved us from Atlanta to Dallas so that he and my mom could be close to their family and help out with their caregiving. Dad's family was from Austin, and mother's family was from Smithville, which is 42 miles east of Austin. It's a town of just 3,800 people. If you ever saw the movie Hope Floats with Sandra Bullock and Harry Connick Jr., that was filmed in Smithville. Well, Mom and Dad made many 450-mile round trips to care for the relatives. In Smithville, there was my grandmother, already in her early 80s, and her two daughters. One was a retired school teacher who was beginning to have bad health, and the other was a learning disabled daughter who'd never been able to work and never really left home. And the three of them were just barely making it. But my mother made trips every 6 to 8 weeks down to Smithville to help them. And she did that for 26 years, from 1962 until the last aunt died in 1988, 26 years. When she would go down, Dad would be the guy who would be the maintenance guy. He would cut the grass, fix anything that needed fixing. He even painted the house once. And Mother would take her own mom and her sisters. She'd take them out, and they'd have hamburgers, and they'd go shopping or go to the doctor. Whatever they needed to do, Mom would see that it got done. And she'd do it with a great spirit. I remember, and I got to tell you, I forgot almost. The two sisters in Smithville were what was called back then old maids. Well, we don't use that term anymore. Mother always said they weren't old maids. She said they were unclaimed treasures. I love that. Unclaimed treasures. And they were. I can always remember one time when I was riding with Mother from Dallas down to Smithville, and I could tell she was tired that day. She was just exhausted. But when we pulled up in front of my grandmother's house, my mother transformed in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, her posture got different, the expression on her face, 10 years melted away. She just got an energy and a humor and that love in her, and she walked into the house as if she was feeling like $1 million. I couldn't get over it. I'd never seen that happen before, ever, to anybody in my life. But I saw it happen to my mom. And I'm sure that many of you are the same. No matter how you're feeling, how tired you are, when it's time for you to show up for those you love, you manage to do it. You transform and you do what you need to do. I'll take us now from the 60s, 10 years forward. It's the 70s. I'm living in New York City, trying to become an actor. And I'm doing lots of singing. I'm trying out for Broadway musicals. But when I would come home at Christmas or in the summer to see everybody, my mother took me aside and said, Jim, now you have a gift of singing, and we're going to make sure you use it while you're home. And my mama played piano. So she and I were kind of a duo, and she would make sure I always sang for the relatives, but not just the relatives. She would book us into nursing homes for me to entertain them. I'll never forget one Christmas. I was only home 5 days, and I sang in 6 nursing homes in 4 cities in, I think, those 5 days. I mean, it was amazing. But my mama was giving me a good example of what caregiving looks like. She was giving me a taste of what I would be needing later on. And I loved those times we had singing together and the looks on the faces of the audience. Now I'm going to take you to a very different experience. It's now the 80s. I've given up on trying to be an actor, and my writing had taken off, and I'm working in LA as a CEO speechwriter and speech coach. And I've got making some money, doing okay. So I came home to Texas one summer and the mid 80s, and I realized that all four of my mother's sisters were together for the first time in a long time. And so I said, Mom and Dad, why don't you bring them over to Austin and I'll take them to lunch? Why don't we do it on the last day I'm going to be in town? I'm catching a plane late afternoon. Bring them over at 11:30. We'll have a great lunch at this Mexican restaurant. And the ladies were so excited. Sadly, a couple of them didn't eat breakfast so that they could still have an appetite. So they showed up, all my parents and the four aunts, age range 78 to 94. And they showed up at 11:30. My parents and I got them into the restaurant. Then I went and parked the car so Dad didn't have to do it. By the time I got back to the restaurant, they were already ordering margaritas. I was a little surprised. So these are Methodist ladies that didn't drink. But my 94-year-old Aunt Bobby had just discovered margaritas. Her granddaughter had told her about them and she tried them and she liked them. So she was the one who ordered a margarita. And of course, all the other aunts went along. So they bring out these enormous, you know those things they bring at Mexican restaurants, those big glasses? They come out with these gigantic margarita glasses. And I'm a little concerned about that, but there they are. So time goes on, everybody's having a good time, they're laughing, they're carrying on, they're getting a little loud. And then I happen to look down the table and my 88-year-old Aunt Ethel is doing this. She is the most ladylike person in the world. She reached down to the bowl of chips and she put it to her mouth and she went, "Ugh!" And then very politely, she put it down on the table. She threw up in the basket of chips at the table. And I see this, I'm going, oh, and I talked to my mother. I said, Mom, Aunt Ethel just threw up into the chips. Mother said, oh, no, she didn't. Mother was a little high at the moment. Then my father's already laughing. I don't know what to do. I go down to Aunt Ethel to help her. Well, she was beyond help. She had never had tequila in her life. She threw up at the table, she threw up on the floor, and she threw up in the ladies' room. She was sick for 2 days, never tasted alcohol the rest of her life. And of course, this took a time, extra time, and I missed my plane flight that afternoon. But you know something? The other aunts were still having a good time. They didn't seem upset at all. They just enjoyed their margaritas and had their lunch. Well, you know, that wacky scene, which I hadn't thought about in years until I wrote this, that wacky scene was a perfect metaphor for caregiving. Because in caregiving, you never know what's going to happen next. And you got to be flexible and you got to improvise. And that's what I was doing that day. Now, there really isn't any smooth transition from Aunt Ethel throwing up to the next subject, which was a support group. Now we're going to move to 2005. I'm living in Austin. I've written my book on caregiving, and I'm speaking all over the place. And one day I'm asked to speak to a support group of caregivers at a local care facility. And I show up and there's about 12 of them sitting around the table. And as we go around the table, I noticed that each one of them in their share was putting themselves down. They were saying, oh, I didn't do this well, or I made this mistake and I didn't show up here and I need to do this better. They were all criticizing their own efforts. I couldn't believe it. When it got to me, I said, guys, I've heard nothing but what you're not doing right. How about all the things that you are doing right? You're the ones who have shown up for your loved ones. You're the ones who are doing the caregiving no matter what. Give yourself a break. Nobody does caregiving perfectly. The most important thing is to do it, to show up. So I'm hoping that none of you are those people who put yourselves down. I hope you're not criticizing yourself for what you're not doing, but remembering all the things you're doing right. You know, I can recall when I first got to Austin in '96, those first 3 or 4 months when I was trying to learn how to be a caregiver and I didn't think I could do it. And I was up to see my parents one morning and we were disagreeing about something and it was a mess. And on my way downstairs, I was going down the back steps, which was enclosed. And going down those steps, I literally yelled out loud, "I can't do this. I don't know how." And I could hear those words bouncing off the wall. And I was mistaken. I could do it. I did learn it, and I got good at it. And that's what we need to remember. We can always learn more, and we can make progress, but we don't ever need to put ourselves down. You know, back then, in those early days, somebody told me about writing a gratitude list. And if you've ever written a gratitude list, it's a great thing to do. What you do is you take a piece of paper and you quickly, in a couple of minutes, you write down, say, 10 things that you're grateful for today, this moment. And you'll be surprised how easy. Sometimes you can go way past 10. I love gratitude lists. In fact, I wrote one yesterday. Let me read you my gratitude list from yesterday. I woke up today. That's always a good one. I am healthy. I have plenty to eat. Some would say too much. I have home air conditioning. And in Austin, that's a big deal, as it probably is in Baton Rouge. The political conventions are almost over, thank God. And I'm speaking to my friends in Baton Rouge, and they don't care if I've got notes. Now, those are the 6 things that I was grateful for. I'm not going to ask you to do a gratitude list today. Instead, I'm going to ask that you answer a question. And we can do this through Zoom. Ellen, tell them how they can answer this question on chat that I'm about to ask.
Sure. So if y'all go look at the bottom of your screen, if it's not popping up for you, just wave your mouse over the screen and you'll see the chat box. And so when Jim prompts you with the question, go ahead and type your answers in that chat box and we'll go ahead and read some of them out.
Great. Okay, here's the question for our interactive moment here. What is the most important thing you have done for your loved one that you're caring for in the last week? Most important thing you've done for them in the last week. Just write down a sentence.
And Jim, do you have maybe an example that they could use?
Oh yeah, well for me, yeah, my example, okay, if it was me, if I was being a caregiver right now, probably the biggest thing would be those conventions I was talking about, because there's one that I watched and one that I didn't watch, and you know, I would probably be having to go along with what they wanted. I might have to watch the convention I didn't want to watch. That would be a big deal, but I would do it. And that's also true with movies. I might want to watch a different movie than they did, and I would let them have the choice.
Thank you. We have a few good ones coming in, Jim. I'm going to read them.
Okay, great. I can't wait to hear these.
So we have...
really do this interactive thing, and I'm excited about it.
We have one that says, helped her remember.
Great.
Washing clothes.
Oh.
Give them all one-on-one, as much one-on-one time as possible. That came from someone out of community.
Oh, that's great.
Keep our environment stable and easy for her to live in.
I love that.
Took mom out of town to my sister's house.
Good.
Helped her rearrange her plant shed. Again, it says, with a smiley face.
I wish they could come help me rearrange my garage. It's the one thing that's still messy.
And this one says, my mom loves to read out loud, and I sat and listened to her read for a while.
Oh, that's a real gift. That's lovely.
Mm-hmm. And then another one, supported my sister who is a caregiver and ordered them breakfast and listened to and understanding their struggles.
Oh, I like that one especially. Right. I think that's an important one. You know, so many people of all ages, but especially older people, love for someone to listen to them. That's what Anthony was doing at the Wesleyan. He was listening to them talk. That's why I think old people sometimes go to doctors a lot, because they got to listen to them. So if you as a caregiver make time to listen to them, that is an enormous gift. And I know how hard you work as caregivers. You work hard, and I'm hoping you all stay healthy. But I just want to say that if you find down the road sometime that you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed out or burned out, I want you not to keep quiet about it. I want you to speak up. This is the time to ask for help. This is the time to call that sibling who always said they would help with your parents but hasn't done anything. That would be a time to say, it's your turn, need a little break. And if they won't help, try to find a friend or a neighbor or maybe someone at your church, or call Ellen and see if she has any ideas of how you might get some help. But what you don't want to do if you're feeling burned out is to be quiet about it. That doesn't help anybody because you may get sick and not be able to be there for your loved one. So if you need help, I urge you to ask for it. Now we're going into another interactive session. We're going to talk about 4 of the questions. I told you last time that in my book, I have 50 questions that will save you time, money, and tears. Well, those questions about dealing with parents. So I picked 4 of those questions today, and they don't deal with your parents or your spouse. They deal with you and your children. Tell them how this is going to work, Ellen.
All right. I feel sort of like a game show host, Jim.
I know. I love this. You're my Vanna White.
So I'm going to display the polling questions as Jim calls them out. You'll be able to answer on the screen, and then it'll tally it up for me, and I'll read the answers and the numbers off to Jim.
Okay, great. Okay, well, let's ask our first question. Put it up on the screen. Okay, we got it? Okay. Have you had a conversation with your children, or if you don't have children, loved ones, about what you want and what you don't want as you age? Have you had that important conversation with your children? Yes or no?
All right, we have some answers coming in right now.
Well, I can't wait to see. I love this polling thing because it gives you an answer so fast. I think it's terrific.
So let's see. Looks like we're at.
Where it's coming from. So there's no way for us to know who's answering. Just put those answers in, yes or no.
That's right.
We'll give them another 5 seconds, and we'll then see where we are.
So right now, Jim, we're at majority yes. We're at about 68% yes, 32% no.
Oh, that's great. That means more than 2/3 of you have had that conversation. That is so great. It's because it's so important to have the conversation. The 32% that don't have it, I'm urging you to do that in the coming weeks. Because, we just don't know when we're going to need caregiving, you or me. Just look what's happened this year. 8 months ago, none of us had ever heard the words COVID-19. Most of us didn't know the word pandemic. And now, less than 8 months later, 5 million cases in America, almost 180,000 deaths. Our whole economy turned upside down. The way we deal with each other changed. All that happened out of nowhere. And those kinds of things can also happen in our own lives. So I want to urge you, if you haven't had the conversation yet, that's 1/3 of you, arrange a time for your kids to meet with you, maybe on a Sunday afternoon. And just take about 2 hours, have them sit around a table and just tell them everything you want to tell them about what you want as you get older and what you don't want and what you can afford and what you may not be able to afford. And talk about the documents you've got and where they are and what your end of life decisions and wishes are. Share all those things. Now, this won't be the only time you have these conversations, but it will open the door to other conversations in the future. It's such an important thing to do. And if you've got family that's out of town, say your children are all over the country, well, maybe when Christmas, if they come together at Christmas, maybe take a couple of hours sometime during that holiday and do it, or when the family is all together. And if you can't get them together then, look what we're doing today. There's Zoom. You could always have a Zoom meeting with your kids and have the conversation over Zoom. You got lots of options. The main thing is schedule a time to do it. Okay, question number 2.
All right. Okay.
Okay, if you become incapacitated, easy for me to say, incapacitated either physically or mentally, do you know who your primary caregiver will be? Do you know who your primary caregiver will be? Well, Ellen, I got to tell you, I forgot to turn on my stopwatch, so I have no idea where I'm in time. So
You're right at 12:30, Jim.
perfect. We're doing good. Great. I can't believe I got this right here in front of me. I've got this thing and I forgot to turn it on. Story of my life. Wow, let's see. Great, great. 3/4 of you know who that person will be. That's great. And for the quarter that don't know, well, you need to find out because, you know, there are kids that show up and there are those who are missing in action when you need them. I have spoken all over the country on caregiving, and I've seen all different kind of family dynamics. There are some families where all the kids show up for the parents. I had this one friend who's got 5 sisters, and the 6 sisters have divided up that care, and they are doing a great job. And they're all over the country, but they divided it up equally, and they are all supporting each other. That is maybe the best example I've ever seen. And I've also seen families where no one shows up for their parents when they need them. No one. And that, it may be a dysfunctional family, I don't know. Or maybe there's just some selfishness going on among the children. I don't know the reason, but sometimes nobody shows up. But most people are in the middle. Most families have a couple of kids, 1 or 2 who show up for caregiving, and maybe 1 or 2 that don't show up, that missing in action people. And that's just the way most families are. So I'm glad that you have identified that person. And those that haven't, it's time to. I need to tell you about my friend Mary, who lives here in Austin. Mary had a father who died about 15 years ago. And then a couple of years later, her mother got ill, and it was going to be a long illness. And soon after the mother got ill, Mary's sister, her only sibling, took a teaching job in Auckland, New Zealand. She didn't say to Mary, I'm not going to be part of mother's care. Oh, no, no, no. She just went as far on the planet as she could go for mother, 12,000 miles. So she was never a part of the care. Mary was left to do all of it for the next 3 years. So my question to you is, do you have an Auckland person in your family? If so, don't be counting on that. Next question. It's a real easy one. Okay, do you have long-term care insurance? Yes or no? I can't wait to see the numbers on this. I sure wish I had it. Sadly, I've got a pre-existing condition and I don't qualify. They don't like prostate cancer. But I'm healthy, 5 years cancer-free. Oh, I can't wait to see.
I'll give it a few more seconds.
Give them a few more seconds. Long-term care insurance.
All right, here it comes.
Okay. What is it? Wow, this is an unusual group. Wow, 26% of you have it. That is great. The national average, 8% of Americans have long-term care insurance. You're more than 3 times that. That is great. I am a big fan of long-term care insurance because it will help you, the person who gets ill, and it will help your estate to protect it, and it will also help your children so they don't have to be paying for things that they can't afford for your care. It helps everybody. You know, my parents had every kind of insurance you can think of. They had it all, except for long-term care insurance. I don't think back in the early 70s there had much. They didn't know about it, or I'm sure they would have signed up. So when Dad retired, he had a pension, he had Social Security, he had $400,000 in stocks and bonds, and that's probably worth close to $1 million today. But he thought that was enough to see him through forever. And yet, when they were in independent living, it did see him through, because their income from Social Security and his pension was enough to pay their expenses. But when they both broke hips the same year and ended up in skilled nursing, their expenses went up 5-fold instantly. And that $400,000 disappeared over the next 4.5 years. And my father passed away just as the money ran out. And I'm so glad that he never knew that. It would have killed it. Mama had to go on Medicaid. And I say thank God for Medicaid, because it allowed her to stay in the Wesleyan for the last 5 years of her life. So I'm just urging you, check out long-term care insurance. First, see if you qualify. And if you're in your 50s, there's a really good chance that you're not going to have the pre-existing conditions that stop so many people from getting it. Because the earlier you apply, the better chance you're going to qualify, and also the lower your premiums be. The younger you are, the lower the premiums are. So if you haven't done it, just check it out and see if you think it's right for you. Last question. This is the one I am most interested in. Do you have a will? I talked about this last month, and it's such an important question. And I want you to be honest here now. Do you have a will? So either you got one or you don't. Can't wait to see the numbers.
Okay, I'm gonna share the results with you, Jim.
Okay, oh, dum, 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 dum. Well, that's good. The national statistic is 3 out of 10 have a will. So 30%, and you're at 58. You are double the national average. Congratulations. However, I noticed that 42% of you are going to be immortal. You're obviously never going to die because you don't have a will. Really? I've thought about it a lot. And I wonder why people don't get wills. And the only word I can come up with is denial. Simple denial. I think people think, if I don't get a will, then I'm not going to die. Or I'm not going to die soon. That is not how it works. You know that, and I know that. So if you don't have a will yet, I want you to ask yourself the question silently right now, why don't I have a will? And I want you to listen to your answer and see if it makes sense, because I'm guessing it doesn't. Because see, a will is a great gift to your children and all those who are going to come after you. And some of you might say, I don't have the money for a will. Well, it costs maybe $500. If you don't have a big estate, you can go to most lawyers and get a will, a simple will for $500. Most people can afford that. If you can't afford the $500, find legal aid or find a lawyer who might do it pro bono. I'm sure you can find someone that will help you get the will for either little or no money. Maybe Ellen can help you find that person. And if all else fails, go on the internet and download one of those basic wills and fill it out and have it notarized. It's better to have something than nothing. Because I got to tell you, if you die without a will, you are leaving the people you love most, your children, your family, you're leaving them a mess. They're going to be in court. They're going to be fighting. It's not going to be pretty. So I urge you, get a will. Okay, that's the end of me preaching. I did a little sermon there. Now I'm going to go into some of the stories from my caregiving life that I I didn't have a chance to tell you last time. And thank you for participating in this so well just now. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, first I want to talk to you about Romel Schmidt. She was the receptionist at the Wesleyan for years and years and years. And she sat behind this big wooden desk that was wide and long. And I'll have to admit, it did look a little bit like a teller's box in a bank. And when my father moved into the Wesleyan nursing home, he wheeled up and he saw that, and it was clear to him this was a bank. So he wheeled over to Romel and said, "I'd like to cash a check." Well, of course, she couldn't do that. She explained to him that she was a receptionist, it wasn't a bank, but he could see by looking at it, it was a bank. So he came back to her over and over again, trying to get money. Finally, she called me up and said, "Jim, I love your dad, but what do I do? He keeps coming." I said, Romel, here's the deal. My father wants to have a little, what he would call folding green to put in his pocket. He just wants to have a little money for his own self-respect. There is nothing in the entire nursing home to spend it on. There were no vending machines. There was absolutely nothing, but he wanted a little money. So Romel and I came up with this plan. I said, "Romel, I'm going to bring you an envelope with $21 bills in it, put my father's name on it. Whenever he rolls up and wants money, give him $2 or $3. It'll make him happy." She started doing that. And after about 4 or 5 days, he would come back and want more. We never knew what happened to the $2 or $3. He didn't spend it. It went somewhere. But nevertheless, she would do that over and over again. And when she ran out of money, I would replenish the new set of $20 bills. So she was happy with that arrangement. I was happy. And most importantly, my dad was happy because it gave him that self-respect that he needed. And for him, having money in his pocket was key to that self-respect. After Dad died, there's a portrait of him that I had, and I gave it to Romel to thank her. And she hung it behind her desk, and it was there until she retired. I told you last time that when my mom got into the nursing home, she got there first before my father. It was really tough on me because I had gotten used to independent living where things were lovely and everybody looked good and smelled good and there weren't buzzers. And, I had a rough time making the transition to the nursing home. She didn't have a rough time. I did. But I made a decision to become part of that community because that's what I needed to do. That was my job. And I began to get to know the staff and the nurses' aides and the residents and their families. And within maybe 2 months, I had become a really active part of the community. And when Mother's Day came along in May, it'd been like Mother had been in for like 5 months. Mother's Day came along and they knew I was a singer. So they said, "Will you entertain at our big Mother's Day event?" I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to." And me, kind of wait to the last minute guy. Yep, I waited to the last minute. And I found a friend in Austin who told me he could play anything on the guitar. Anything, that's what he said. So I said, "Great, will you help me?" And he said, "Sure." So the night before the big party, I go to his house to practice. Turns out, of all the songs ever written in English, he and I only knew 5 together. He had kind of overstated his ability. Here are the 5 songs that we could do together, and this is what we did for Mother's Day. "Hello, Dolly," "Over the Rainbow," "Amazing Grace," "Tennessee Waltz," and you'll love this one, "Trailer for Sale or Rent." That was our Mother's Day selection. Well, they sent us to the memory care unit first to kind of get warmed up. And fortunately, those people did not remember much of what they heard, which was a blessing. And then we moved to the big room where there must have been 200 people. And we gave it our best. And they were, polite applause. But they did not ask me to come back to sing at that Wesleyan for 5 years. And when I finally came back the second time, I found someone really good. And we practiced a lot. I got to talk about CNAs, nurses' aides, because I love them. They are the people that do the hard work. They're the ones that bathe and feed and care for our loved ones. They know them. And I had lots of examples of that. I can remember one time that I came into the nursing home, and it was about 7 o'clock. I was a little late. I was hoping to catch Mother awake, but she'd already gone to bed. And I was about to leave when one of the CNAs that I knew very well and liked, she came up to me and she said, "Mr. Comer, do you know that your mama's shoes stink?" I said, "Pardon me?" She said, "They stink." I said, "Well, she's got 2 pair. They both stink." I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Would you like to smell them?" I said, "No, I'll take your word for it." Well, that word that she used, stink, worked on me. The very next day, I bought my mother 2 new pair of house shoes because that's all she would wear. I delivered them to the Wesleyan and we threw the offending shoes into the garbage. And that happened because a nurse's aide got my attention with a very vivid word. And I loved her for it. I mean, she said you kind of need new shoes or something. I might not have moved so quickly. But the word stink got me into action. Now, that might not have been the word that her superiors would have wanted her to use, but it worked for me. And that's what I love about nurses' aides. They'll tell it like it is. They won't mince words. And I always listen to what they say. There was another time when I came up to see Mom, and it was, I was on I-35, which is our terrible freeway that's always just full of traffic. And it took me like an hour to get up there, rush hour. And by the time I got up to the nursing home, Mother was eating dinner. And that's not my favorite time to be around. So I thought, I'm going to lie down on her bed and take a little nap till she comes in. And I'm lying on the bed, and I'm about to fall out to sleep. And all of a sudden, this big nurse's aide, who must have been 6 feet tall, this woman, came right up to the bed, and she looked down at me. And we were friends. And she said, "I think I'm going to give you a bath." And I said, "Great." And I started taking off my shirt, and I was all half shot. And she started. She didn't want to give me a bath. But it was fun. We had some fun together, and that is half the battle. You know, I think that so often we forget the power of humor. There is just nothing better than humor. If you're able to bring humor into your interactions with your loved ones, it is a saving grace. And I'm never going to forget the time that the lady wanted to give me a bath, and I got her screaming out of the room. I love that moment. Then there's my mother, the escape artist. This is a woman who at this time was in her, probably early 90s. And she was in a wheelchair 99.99999% of the time. But she had her moments. One night, it was in the winter, and I guess for some reason she got cold. And in the middle of the night, she took the restraint that they had, which was tied into the nurse's thing, the thing, she managed to get it off. And she managed to scoot herself down along the wall and got out of her bed and then got up and walked across the room and got into the bed with one of her neighbors. Well, the alarm finally went off, and the nurses came in looking for my mother, and they couldn't find her. They looked all over the nursing home for Mother, every hallway, every wing. They couldn't find her. And finally, they came back to the room, and in the corner with her neighbor, there was my mother, happily curled up asleep. They went over to her and said, "Mrs. Comer, we need to get you back in your bed." And she said, "Leave me alone. I'm sleeping with my husband." And in her mind, she was. Well, they got her back in her bed eventually. And then we needed to use some improvisation. We needed to make sure that she couldn't fall out of that bed and break another hip if she tried to get out another night. So the nurses and I got together and we figured out a way. We just moved the mattress way down low, almost to the ground, so that if she tried to get out and succeeded, she wouldn't fall. There wasn't any long distance for her to fall. And that worked. And I think she only got out of bed one more time in the next 5 years. Now that's pretty good. But again, it's that finding a situation and then finding a solution for it that works. And it just takes improvisation. Then there's my friend Libby. Libby and I went to college together, and we also moved to New York about the same time. She loved it up there and had a good career and married a New Yorker and still living there. And when her father was in the nursing home after his wife died, he eventually got into a nursing home in Oklahoma City. Libby did her best to come see him at least 2 or 3 times a year, but it was a big trip. And she was worried about how he was doing. And one time she made the trip down to Oklahoma City, and she rushed to the nursing home because she wanted to see him before he went to sleep, but she got there just a little too late. And when she arrived to his room, he was sound asleep. But as she looked down at her dad, she noticed that there was this lip imprint in red on his forehead. And it was clearly someone had given him a kiss. And then she realized it had to be the nurse on his wing who liked him so much. And Libby realized that there was somebody right there who just cared about her father so much that she said goodnight to him and gave him a little kiss. And that was just worth its weight in gold to Libby, because she then knew that although she couldn't be there that often, there was someone there who loved her dad like she did. That is wonderful caregiving. And it's just a beautiful story. Lastly, I want to talk about my favorite experience I ever had in the 14 years of caregiving. I talked a little about it last month, but I'm going to tell you more today. It was me taking my dad to the air show. Once a year, Georgetown had a big air show, and they always had a B-17, the great bomber of World War II, the bomber on which my father served for 3 years. And so every year we would always go see the B-17. And this year he'd already fallen once, and he hadn't broken his hip yet, but he was using a walker. And so we got there, and they let us have a golf cart to take him out to the B-17, which was like 3/4 of a mile down the runway. And as we're heading out with the golf cart, we had a young Army guy driving us, and I mentioned to him that Dad had done 75 missions in a B-17. And this young soldier just couldn't believe it. He said, "Did you say 75? Didn't they send them home if they did 25, if they lived that long?" I said, "That's right. They did send Dad home after 25, and he volunteered to go back and did another 50 missions." Well, this soldier just couldn't believe it. I mean, he turned back to my father and said, "Sir, you are my hero." Well, as you may remember, my father was stone deaf and would not wear a hearing aid. So he went, which meant, "I have no idea what you just said, but I know you meant well." And I turned to the soldier and I said, "Oh, that was so nice of you to say that. But my dad didn't hear a word of it because he's so deaf. I mean, you'd have to scream it for him to hear it." He said, "No problem." Get ready. He said, "Sir, you are my hero." The entire air show heard, including my father. He just had the biggest smile on his face. And about that time, we felt the first raindrops come down because the sky had turned black. And we pulled in right up to the B-17 and got Dad out under the wings just as the sky opened up. And there was a thunderstorm of biblical proportions. And all 10,000 air show attendees got soaked to the bone, except us, because we were sheltered under the wings of the B-17, just as my father had been 60 years earlier. Well, pretty soon the crew heard about this veteran in their midst, and they came down, stood in line to shake my daddy's hand. And I just pulled back and let him have his time with them. And finally, the rain stopped, and Dad and I took our folding chairs and we set them up over in the grass beside the runway. We were surrounded by the plains of his departed youth. You know, we sat there for a long time. And I don't believe we said a word because perfect moments don't require words. But I would not have had that perfect moment if I hadn't shown up for all the moments, good, bad, sad, horrible, all of them. It's a package deal. I'm just so glad that I did show up. And I know you are showing up. You know, my mama used to love to say, you know how much it cost me to stay in the hospital when Jim was born? $4 a day. And he has been worth every penny of it. Well, it took me 14 years, but I think I finally paid off her investment. It's been so good being with you all again today. I think we got in just about an hour, and I hope that you got some questions for me. I'd love to take any questions or comments that you may have. Love to have them. Ellen, do we have some questions?
Let's see. No questions just yet, but
oh, somebody send me a question. Use that chat again.
we'll give them a couple minutes, Jim.
Yes, indeed. And we have a surprise for you at the very end, because I am taking a video class right now. And for the video class, obviously we do videos. And I did one about eating during the pandemic. And it's called Jim and the Donut, and it's now on Facebook, but you're going to see it at the end of this today. Did we get any questions in?
No questions yet, but I have a question. I think
Okay.
I shared this last time, but can you just tell us again where people can find your book if they'd be interested in reading it?
Yeah, the book is called When Roles, R-O-L-E-S, When Roles Reverse, and you can find it on Amazon. It's been there for a long time. It came out in 2006. We've sold about 20,000 copies, so it's done pretty well, and it's still there. And if you have any trouble, you can, if you can't find it on Amazon, which you should be able to, you can get in touch with me, Jim Comer, Jimcomer, at me.com. Jim Comer at me.com, and I can send you a copy and I'll sign it for you. I've got some copies here. So if you'd like a signed copy, just send me an email and we'll work that out, and you can send me a check in the mail.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple questions coming.
Okay, I can't wait.
So the first one, maybe something that I can help answer. It says, if a person lives in the Alexandria area, where can they find help for Alzheimer's? So I'll email you, Miss Diane, about some resources for that.
Great.
Just because Jim does live kind of far. So let's see. I have another one. Often my mom doesn't want to go to sleep. Any suggestions for that?
Doesn't want to go. Well, first of all, I can relate to your mother, because my mother always kidded me. She said, Jim, you find reasons to stay up late. And I'm afraid to say that I still do. As far as your mother, well, you know, I wish I could say that there was an easy answer to that. I don't know that there is one. You can maybe try to encourage her to go to bed earlier. I don't know how you would do that. I mean, you can make, if you're going to bed earlier, you could tell her, you know, I need to go to bed, Mom. Would you please do me a favor? And so we can both go to bed at the same time and get a good night's sleep. If you could appeal to her caring instinct, that might do it. I don't know, that's a shot. Or you can just, you can sort of turn things off. Does she like to stay TV? I don't know, if it's TV she's staying up for, you could maybe turn the TV off. That's a possibility. So I would try to find some practical things, kind of make the house ready for bedtime, and then let her know you need your sleep so you can be there for her. And she might respond to that.
Okay, thanks so much, Jim. And I think got a couple more.
I see one right there.
Yep. And we have Mr. Ron shared. Thank you so much. And what were your greatest challenges and your greatest successes as a caregiver?
Well, the greatest challenge originally, when I first got to Texas, I talked about it last time, it was not realizing that I needed to I was trying to get my mother to be the way she was before Alzheimer's. That I wanted her to be in my world, the way she used to be. And of course, I got some help and I learned she couldn't be in my world anymore. I had to go into her world. And I got to tell you, the second I did that, everything changed. The most important thing I did in caregiving was to go into her world and stay in her world, even as it changed over 14 years. But by being where she was, not where I wanted her to be, everything was so much easier. I highly recommend that. As far as my greatest success, well, I think that they lived to be 96 and 97, that there was 14 years. Mother lived 14 years after Dad's stroke, and he lived 10 years more. So I think the fact that they had a decent quality of life and that they were able to have a long, long life, I guess that was my greatest success.
Great. Thank you, Jim. One more question.
Okay.
Any tips for how you would handle sundowning, any symptoms of sundowning?
Golly. You know, I've heard a lot about that. My folks did not experience that. Mother really, I never did notice sundowning with her. I heard a lot about it. I know many people have it. I just think that that's a time to be extra kind. Remember what's going on. So if they irritate you, which they could, or if they ask the same questions over and over, which they might, just remember, this is your time to be as loving and kind as you can, because there is no magic bullet that will solve sundowning. There just isn't. And I don't know a lot about it because it wasn't one of the issues that came up for us. But I always believe that kindness is the best answer when you've got a problem.
Great. Okay, so we're right at the 1 o'clock hour, Jim.
Oh, I am so thrilled. I never
Would
thought
you like
we'd
me
get
to
to
show
an
your
hour.
video?
That's great.
Okay.
Let's show the video. I hope y'all enjoy this.
Last Saturday, I saw a number on my bathroom scale that had never appeared there before. 152. 152 pounds. Now, I know to you 6-footers and above, you don't think that's anything. But to a 5'6.5" guy like me, it is an enormous number. I immediately turned sideways, looked into the mirror naked to see if that number reflected reality. I looked like I was carrying twins. I mean, 17 pounds above the 135 that I had weighed just last fall. And those 17 pounds were not applied to my massive chest or bulging biceps. Oh, no, no, no. Right down here in my gut. I know, there's a pandemic going on. We are all under stress. We're stuck at home. We're zoomed out and we're hug deprived. And that makes many of us, say, 200 million, want to eat our way across a refrigerator shelf. And it's so easy to do because the refrigerator is right back there in the kitchen, 10 seconds away, 7 if you run, and I have. And once you're finished with the refrigerator, you can pick up the phone and order takeout or delivery. I have read about the quarantine 15. That's the 15 pounds that many Americans have gained just since March. But I thought those 15 pounds would be on other people, not me. Of course, I know there are things we can do to minimize how the weight gain looks. I'm doing one of them right now. I'm speaking to you from the chest up. But that gets old for the viewer. Of course, you can also wear black, as I'm doing, and make sure you don't tuck it in, which I'm doing. And, that helps a little. I mean, Elvis wore black for the last 10 years of his life, and we still knew that he was big as a house, so it really doesn't help much. And then there's the old chair. You can hide behind the chair. If you've got it on wheels, like this one, you can move all over the room and no one sees your stomach. Really good, unless you want to go outside. No, there are really only 2 things that we can do to help ourselves. Let's start with exercise. And I took the bull by the horns. I went out last weekend and I bought a Fitbit, $149 plus tax. And I got home, I was really excited about it. And I opened the little instruction book and it said, you need to do 10,000 steps a day. 10,000. That is what Olympic athletes do. But I bought it, so I was gonna follow through. I walked that very first night. I walked a mile. I did a half mile to my friend's house. Needed to rest. Went in her backyard, sat down, had water, and then I walked a half mile back. 3,000 steps. That's all. But on the weekend, this last weekend, I walked 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's the most I had walked in decades. 7,000 steps. And I was so tired I had to waste the rest of the morning on the couch. So obviously, exercise is not going to do it for me. We're down to the big culprit. Sugar and carbs. I'm going to tell you about 3 of my favorite comfort foods that I'm now going to give up. The first is lime sherbet. I have loved lime sherbet since I discovered it in the 3rd grade. I know it's not sophisticated. I don't care. I love it. It's got so much sugar. And then there is Simply Limeade. Oh, it is the most refreshing drink, yet it has enough sugar in it to require an insulin chaser. Then there's the worst of all, Krispy Kreme chocolate glazed donuts. Not one redeeming social quality, except the taste. Here's what I'm going to do. Do you see that commitment? I tell you right now, I'm telling the entire world, well, maybe not the entire world, but whoever's watching, maybe 20 people. I am telling you, I am going to lose those 17 pounds by Halloween. That's right. It's only 1.25 pounds a week. I can do it. And on November 1st, I am going to report back to you. I'm going to do another video, and I'm going to tell you whether I've lost the weight or not. I know, as soon as I've said those words, there are some cynics in this audience, and you only have one question in your mind. When Jim finishes recording this video in a few seconds, is he going to stick his hand down in that trash can and get that donut or not? I am wondering that myself.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. It was a wonderful presentation. I thank you so much for sharing your stories and all of your information with us again.
Thank you. I loved being here, and now I've got a new speech. Thanks to you all. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Everybody be safe during this storm. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye, guys.